products in the first 3 quarters of 2024, up from $156,000 during the same period in 2023, a more than 30% increase. This was primarily driven by interest in MLI Select, an insurance product that incentivizes affordability, accessibility, and climate compatibility. We've also seen increased uptake of our securitization products, namely NHA mortgage-backed securities and Canada Mortgage bonds. Through those commercial products, we are helping players in the private housing market to do what we need them to do and what they want to do, which is to build homes. I would note that we're Canada's only provider of mortgage loan insurance for multi-unit residential properties. On our research side, for example, we recently released our Fall 2024 Residential Mortgage Industry Report, one of our flagship reports. We also released a survey of rental housing developers that drills down into the challenges they face in building more rental homes and the opportunities that exist to increase that supply. The third pillar of work, of course, is delivering government housing programs. This includes managing loan programs to support the construction of both market and affordable housing, again, utilizing our position and expertise as a financial institution. It also includes contribution-only programs to support housing for the most vulnerable Canadians and programs to encourage innovation in the housing system. For example, we recently launched the new Co-op Housing Development Program. Starting this year, the program will provide $1.5 billion in loans to support the development of thousands of affordable rental cooperative housing units in Canada. In delivering these government initiatives, we are benefiting from our relationship with Housing Infrastructure and Communities Canada. This is the federal department now responsible for housing policy and program development. Indeed, you probably noticed that's a key theme in all of our activities: partnership. CMHC does nothing alone. We can do nothing alone. Everything we do is done hand in hand with partners in the private and not-for-profit sectors and in government. This way, we ensure that our efforts and our funding go further and benefit the most people. This is where we stand as we enter the new year. With a sharpened focus on our core business and our strengths as a financial institution, CMHC can continue to make a positive impact on the housing system and on the lives of Canadians. Thank you again for the invitation. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Volk. We'll now begin with Mr. Aitchison for 6 minutes.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Welcome, Ms. Volk. Would you agree that the cost to build a home is a big barrier, huge, one of the biggest barriers to home ownership and affordability right now?
Cost of building is certainly a factor in the affordability of homes, yes.
You add up the municipal charges and fees and taxes, the provincial charges, fees and taxes, and federal charges, fees and taxes. Do you know what the average cost of that is across Canada on the average home?
I don't know that I have. I don't know of a number of that. Nadine, do you know if we have a?
If you're talking about more of the planning fees to get to the construction of housing, it's approximately.
What I said was you add up the total cost of government charges and fees at the local, provincial, and federal level. Do you know what the average across the country is, the cost per each home percentage?
So we, Mr. Chair, thank you for the question. We can certainly return with a precise number, but
that's okay. It's about 30%.
That's what I was going to say.
The average is about 30% across the country. I would think you would have that. In Ontario, we just saw reports about 36%. So, are you aware that that's the biggest chunk of the cost of homes in the country? 30 to 36%.
Sounds about right. 30% sounds about right. Yes.
Would you agree then that we need to reduce the cost of government in the process of getting homes built?
Anything we can do to reduce the cost of housing is important.
And so if government is the biggest chunk of that cost, it makes sense that we should try to reduce the cost of government.
I think anything we can do to reduce the cost of housing is important.
At the federal government's direction, your organization, through the Housing Accelerator Fund, gave about $471 million to the City of Toronto. The first quarter of that has gone out, I take it. And right after they finished signing that deal, they increased development charges by about 42%, which is a pretty significant cost on a home in Toronto. That means the development charge went from $117,000 in May 2004 up to $137,000 by June 2024. Do you think that that's going to be an impediment to housing starts in Toronto?
Development charges are definitely an impediment to housing starts, yes.
Are you aware that housing starts in Toronto are down by about 40% this year, since last year?
I believe that, yes.
City of Vancouver got $115 million approval on the Housing Accelerator Fund through your agency. Housing starts there down 15%. Are you aware of that as well?
That sounds about right.
Yeah. Ottawa, 176.3 million housing starts are down about 22%. So I'm wondering how much you think maybe cost of government at the local level. You had a federal government giving money to cities that are actually then turning around and making it more expensive to build. If there's something we could be doing at the federal level, instead of just giving more money to cities, if there's something we could be doing at the federal level to help reduce the cost of homes.
Well, that's a big question. Let me address the housing affordability, the housing affordability fund first, if I may. The intention of the money that's being given through the HAF is to provide for systemic change in the municipalities. It's to speed up zoning, to speed up execution, to speed up application turnaround, some other things that will make it faster for execution.
Can
yes?
I ask you about that then? The crisis is today, and so I wonder if that's the most, you think that's the most prudent investment of tax dollars in trying to fix long-term problems without any real tangible evidence that that's occurring. I mean, you look at what's going on in Toronto, it looks like that's not working, and it's a lot of money.
It is early, I think, to see housing units result from that. So
You can appreciate, though, it's early to see the results. That, like, your language is I struggle with it because the crisis is now.
Right. I hear what you're saying. I think there are other programs that are targeted to sooner. But for that program, I think the results it's early to see housing units as a result, to have seen starts increase already. It's early. We don't have, I apologize, we don't have the reporting from the cities yet to have the attribution of the results, but that just because the program is relatively new in its implementation, so we don't have those results yet. But it is intended to speed it up, but it'll be early to actually see that turn into construction started.
Can you tell me how much money the CMHC made on its insurance products last year? Roughly?
Yes.
Yeah, commercial, thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. It's roughly $1 billion a year that we make out of our commercial products.
So I just worked I used to be in real estate, so I had a residential closing cost worksheet that I would always work out. So on the purchase price of a home in Ontario at $750,000, and a first-time home buyer who had to could only put 5% down, which is $37,500. Their CMHC fee, I calculate, would be about $8,371, which would go on to their mortgage, generally speaking. Do you think it makes sense for the CMHC to be generating that much profit in the middle of a housing crisis on first-time home buyers?
It's we are an insurance company, and we have a legislated mandate to operate as a commercial mortgage insurance company. We have 2 private sector competitors, and the intention is to operate on a level playing field with them.
Okay, I appreciate you don't really want to answer that question. Quickly to the MLI Select program. This is one of those great programs that's actually worked really well in your organization, and yet recently your organization made a minor change to the MLI Select program. You've effectively increased the penalty for when multi-unit builders pay out their CMHC mortgage. It's an increase of about 300%, which means it actually discourages people to pay out their CMHC mortgage and reduces liquidity in the market. Why would you make such a change, especially without consultation?
Thank you, Mr. Hickson. To catch that, your time has gone
Thanks.
by. Mr. Fragas-Catos, you have 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you to both of you for being here today. Ms. Folk, the point that you just raised as far as red tape, you talked about zoning specifically. Restrictive zoning has been pointed to by economists, housing experts, advocates as being arguably the single biggest impediment to getting more homes built. And if we don't add to supply, prices will stay where they are and maybe even go higher. So could you talk about that? Could you talk about zoning in particular, how it stands in the way of getting more types of homes built, homes that would add to affordability in the market, and what the federal government through the Accelerator Fund is doing to address that?
Certainly. Since my appointment, I've been across the country talking to developers across the country, and I have heard from almost all of them that zoning, the time that it takes to get zoning revised and get their applications approved is too long at the municipal level. They're different, it's not consistent across the country, that different municipalities have different zoning restrictions, different requirements, different speeds at which they are able to address the issues. So it's not universal across the country, but the issue is constant. The nature of the issue is constant. And it does cause developers significant delay in getting their projects off the ground, and because it takes a while until they can get to start constructing, which has two problems. One is that in itself increases the cost of construction because they have carry costs. They have, if they're already, they can't get to construction, then they can't get ultimately to the sales. But it also delays the construction and on housing that is desperately needed across the country.
And so would you say that the Accelerator Fund is helping to address that significantly?
That is the intent, yes. As I say, it's early for us to report results because we have had agreements with the cities. They're required to report within a year of the date at which the agreement was signed, and very few of them are actually at the date at which their agreements have been signed. So we're just getting to the point now where we're going to start seeing the city's results on that. But we are optimistic that we will see some good results on that.
Okay, well, that's encouraging. Could you talk about other sources of red tape that stand as impediments, for example? What about parking minimums? We hear about this a great deal. As I am an urban-based member of Parliament, most of those on this committee, at least on this side, are representing cities. Talk about parking minimums for a moment. I know this is a huge source of frustration for many.
Yes, and I have spoken to developers who have said that they would love to do such and such a project in such and such a location, but they can't deal with that because of the parking minimum. It adds to the costs and makes it unaffordable.
And does the Accelerator Fund address this?
Yes, I believe that's one of the things that the cities could address in their commitments.
Okay. What about, where are we at with rental construction in Canada? The GST has been lifted on construction costs, as you know. Where are we at in terms of permits for multi-unit residential construction, which would be for apartments, obviously? Where are things on that front?
Yes, I do have some. Would you have those handy?
Yeah, so Canada builds approximately around 250,000 units a year. We have not seen an increase to that start on average this year. However, the transformational nature of the change is, because you've been asking about the Accelerator Fund, you will see in the coming years, because you have to think about, it takes up to 3 to 4 years to get the shovel to the ground ready in order to build housing. And so the Accelerator Fund is all meant to transform that planning stage, whether it's zoning, parking requirements, densification, NIMBYism, and by removing those obstacles and those barriers at the local level, we do anticipate a growth in permitting and the acceleration of permitting, because those are the targets that were provided by the municipalities through the agreement in the next few years to come. And as President mentioned, we should have results momentarily because the requirement is to report back after 12 months of the signing of the agreement, which is this time.
In fact, you talk about permitting. I did want to ask about permitting as well. We know that lengthy wait times for permits are yet another impediment to building. As I understand it, the Accelerator Fund has placed a special focus on this by helping communities put in place new permitting systems, digital permitting systems. And some communities like Kelowna, for example, have gone one step further and with the assistance of the fund have put in place AI-powered permitting systems that the community's own mayor told me personally has reduced permitting times that were taking close to 2 years now to 10 days. Could you talk about how transformational that could be for getting homes built in Canada? I mean, obviously it's going to be transformational, but in the wider context of things, this sounds not just like a change, it sounds like a revolutionary change. What do you think about that?
I think it is a revolutionary change, and I think it's so important. As we said, the purpose of the HAF is to make sustainable change. They will be these will be changes that will improve for generations to come, we hope, and certainly to improve throughout the term of the housing crisis.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fragascatis. Madame Chabot, pour a 6 minutes.
Merci, bienvenue au comité.
Thank you and welcome to the committee, Ms. Volk. Well, look, you are the Chief Executive Officer and President of the CMHC, and you've told us about your mission. There's one aspect of it that seems important. You are administering the programming linked to the national strategy that has been set in place. I would like to hear you. I know that you have joined the CMHC recently, and you have many people working under you, but I'd like to hear you on your evaluation on the various programs, but more specifically, the overall strategy, the national strategy. Is its target of providing affordable housing to people, is this strategy as a whole succeeding? And if it isn't, what do you think should be done to bring it online?
Thank you for the question. That's a big question. So there are many, many components of the National Housing Strategy. It has as its central core the desire to improve affordability of housing for many vulnerable groups, vulnerable populations, including seniors, women, children fleeing violence. It's very
Oui, vu qu'on n'a pas beaucoup de temps, je
Yes,
connais.
but given that we have little time here, I do know the names of the programs. I'd like to know whether, in your opinion, this program is meeting the need, because the CMHC feels that 3.5 million units should be created between now and 2030, and we're already heading into 2025, to really solve this availability crisis. Thus, my question. The government has set up a national strategy for housing which was supposed to meet the need, but it doesn't look like we're getting there. What do we need to change to make this better?
opinion, the National Housing Strategy is having an effect. I firmly believe that no one level of government can solve the housing crisis. I believe that this is an all-hands-on-deck issue. We need support from provinces, from municipalities, from the private sector, from nonprofit groups. So it is a collection of partnerships that's going to help us get through the housing crisis that we find ourselves in.
Oui, c'est vrai, c'est une
Yes,
responsabilité.
true enough. It's a shared responsibility. In that regard, Quebec, well, it should be Quebec's, well, it's Quebec's mission, actually, as well as that of other provinces, the whole matter of housing. That said, a good deal of money is being invested. Groups come to see us, they come to meet us, saying we're not getting there, we're not making it, and that a specific amount, I mean, there's a recommendation, which they insist on, that at least 20% of housing, not market housing, but affordable housing should be allocated. Many groups have insisted on this, and we ourselves have underscored this in our report tabled on finance monetization of the housing market. But look, you're administering a number of programs and purses of various weights in money, and there's a level of affordability or accessibility by program, but I'm looking for your overall opinion. Do you think that at this point we should review all these programs to really insist on supply and the need, really, the need is for affordable and accessible housing?
National Housing Strategy that are making a difference. If I look at the affordable construction ACLP apartment construction loan program, we're financing almost $4 billion a year of mortgages. That's improving the affordability of housing in Canada. There are many programs targeting contributions and grants that allow the deeper affordability that I think you're talking about, the real social housing. And we have, there are many programs that are oversubscribed, and we're able to
Je
fill them with good
m'excuse vraiment,
applications.
j'aime pas ça
Look,
couper
I'm really
les
sorry.
personnes.
I really dislike cutting people off. But if I put a question that's a simple question, in your opinion, I know that certain programs do this and other programs do that, and that these matters are announced, and we indeed announce all this in our ridings in our communities, such and such a purse, such and such an amount for such and such a program. Sometimes it's funding that is sort of recycled, if I can put it that way, that's already come through another program, and now it's being pushed off to another program. But look, yes or no, are there any programs that should be tightened up with funding specifically aimed at affordable housing. In your understanding of the situation, do you think we're going to solve this affordability crisis, and that's the demand, with this strategy, or do we need another strategy?
Does the demand exceed what's available to bring to the table at the moment? Likely. There is a lot of affordability. There is a crisis in affordability, particularly in the deeply affordable housing, which is, I think, what you're primarily talking about. And I think that there are solutions that involve multiple partners, including the federal government, the provincial government, the municipalities, and we're working very closely with those partners and with the nonprofit community as well.
See Madame Chabot, Madame Zerlo, 4-6.
Thank you very much. And there's so much to say and ask, and we're not going to have enough time, but I really appreciate you being here. And this is an opportunity to change the culture at CMHC. The previous CEO had been to this committee many times, and we raised issues at this committee around the fact that, you need to be speaking to people on the ground that are suffering, that are becoming homeless. And I'm hoping this is an opportunity for you to change the culture at CMHC. And I might have some questions about that related to the reallocation of CMHC policy staff to internal government staff, and maybe your thoughts on how the new thinking needs to be at the highest levels, because the way we have been thinking isn't solving the problem. But what I wanted to really get on the table today was this problem around REITs and the loans. So we know that low-income tenants, persons with disabilities, single parents, seniors and immigrants are suffering from evictions and above guideline rent increases in many buildings that are owned by real estate investment trusts. And I wanted to let you know that CMHC is financing to billionaire REITs, and it is resulting in low-income tenants being evicted. Starlight alone, who is the asset manager for the government in their public service pension board investments, is boasting $425 million in low-interest CMHC debt, and it's actually using this as a selling feature to unload purpose-built, stable rental housing. And I have it up here, RENX, Real Estate News Exchange. They're selling 26 properties here, Starlight. And they are saying that these properties are in the portfolio, have in place financing at fixed below market interest rates, of which a significant portion is CMHC Corporation insured. The $425 million in CMHC debt, with a weighted average of 2.52% interest rate and a remaining term of 4.2 years, is assumable, subject to lender consent. I also wanted to share with you that the CEO of RioCan said, "The cheapest debt in town is CMHC guaranteed debt, which you can put on rental residential buildings, so we are quite hopeful that our first CMHC transaction will take place before the end of the summer." Now, I'll also let you know that there was a news story out today that the tenants who are being evicted have no stable housing. The fastest growing population of homeless people is seniors, are now having to sue, and RioCan is one of the folks that they are suing as part of a class action lawsuit, because of overpaying rent, potentially based on AI price fixing. So, Ms. Volk, as I shouldn't speak for the committee, are out speaking to these seniors that are being displaced and asking me to find them a nursing home to live in. Single parents with kids with a disability are being evicted from their homes and have to find new homes with new schools, with new plans. Or immigrants who so desperately have, they've already suffered trauma in their home countries here. They are the people that I'm talking to, not the developers who I worked 8 years with on city council, but these people. Do you think that that's a good culture for CMHC? That they're helping greedy corporate CEOs and REIT holders to make profits while residents are being evicted and becoming homeless?
Thank you for the question. Maybe I'll start with some positives, but I will get to your question, I promise you. Our mortgage loan insurance programs are the primary reason that there is rental construction in the country. There is
I'm just going to stop you there, Ms. Volk, because I think you need to get out into the community. A lot of purpose-built rental has gone by the wayside because things like what Starlight is doing right now, they're unloading affordable rental housing so that they can sell it to developers for 30, 40, and 50-story towers of luxury rental. And this government in my community is coming with loans, $200 million loans to try to get some affordable housing, which is pathetic because they're not even giving money. They're asking for it back. It's displacing people. So I just want, in the context of knowing that those loans that you're giving to Dream or any of these REITs, not you, I'm sorry, shouldn't say you, that CMHC is giving to Dream or these other REITs is actually on land where they're taking down affordable housing. So you restart your question, but please, in the context of this land didn't just come from anywhere. This is land where people were living on, sometimes for decades.
I understand. Thank you for the clarification. So it is important, though, to note that there would be very little, if any, rental construction in Canada if it weren't for CMHC's insurance programs. We are the only game in town to provide insurance on purpose-built rental, and we are doing incredible volumes of it. Most of that is with private sector players, and thank heavens that the private sector players are active, because without them we wouldn't be having any purpose-built rental in the country at all. So, so they play an important role in the ecosystem of housing. I understand the particular concern you're raising about the ability to have more affordable rental spaces be demolished and replaced with luxury rentals. That is something that we are concerned about. That is something that the government is concerned about. It is the reason that the federal government announced its intention to look at and develop the Canada Rental Protection Fund. And that, oh, thank you.
Ms. Gray, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. At this committee on September 27th, 2023, the Liberal Housing Minister was asked about Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, CMHC, staff bonuses and committed to review the process by which bonuses are provided to staff. Has the Housing Minister initiated any conversation with you as the President and CEO of CMHC or any other executive since that commitment over a year ago?
I'm not aware of what, thank you for the question. I'm not aware of what conversations he may have had with my predecessor. Since my arrival, I have had many conversations with the board. We have an annual review of our compensation, and it is the board that determines the compensation approach for the
Right, but has the Housing Minister, have you had conversations with the Housing Minister on this?
I don't recall a specific conversation with the minister, but I suspect the minister will have spoken to the board, since it's the board who
Thank you.
approves
Can you please table a list for any a list of any meetings or discussions that would have occurred with the minister on this issue, please?
Sure.
Thank you. Records show in 2023 the total amount of individual incentive award bonuses provided to 2,283 CMHC staff in 2023 was roughly $26 million. That's an average of $11,623 per employee. Does that sound correct?
Yes, I'm just looking for my notes to verify with that,
Thank you.
but that's just
Record
about
shows
exact.
CMHC had 2,320 employees and 2,320 employees and 2,283 received bonuses. That means 98% of employees received bonuses. Does that sound correct?
Is that, sorry, did you say that was 2023?
That was 2023. Yes.
That could be. I have the figure for 2024, which was 95%, so it's probably in that range, yeah.
So you have 2024 figures as well. Okay. So records show in 2023 CMHC's 10 executive salaries totaled approximately $3,110,000. So the average salary of your executives would be approximately $311,000. Does that sound correct?
The average executive salary was did you say 300?
About $311,000.
For executives, that sounds in the right ballpark. Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
I would have said
The
around
other
3,
officials
so,
nodding.
yeah.
Okay, thank you. Records show in 2023, CMHC's 10 executive incentive award bonuses totaled $831,062. So the average executive bonus would be approximately $83,000. Does that sound correct?
Well, we don't call them bonuses. They aren't actually bonuses. It's incentive pay that's held
The
back from
incentive award
compensation at the
slash
beginning of the
bonuses.
year.
Yeah, so those amounts are correct. Are you aware of the average salary in Canada in 2023?
I don't know it off the top of my head, but I suspect you do.
Yeah, the average salary was $64,800. So therefore, the average bonus paid to executives at the government's housing agency you oversee was more than the average salary of Canadians. Will
Except that it's not a
2024
bonus.
executive bonuses be higher or lower than in 2023?
So I do want to set the record straight. We don't pay bonuses. We have incentive pay, but it's a very different pay structure.
Right, so
And
it's an incentive award slash bonus. It's in addition to their normal
I
flat
wouldn't say
rate.
it's a slash bonus.
Oh, okay, so you're
So-
using a different term. Okay.
Well, it's a
So
different philosophy.
Can you table all records per employee incentive award bonuses for all the employees at CMHC, including the 10 executives for 2023 to this committee?
I absolutely cannot. It's against privacy, the Privacy Act. It's personal and confidential.
So if not all employees, can you table records of the employee incentive award bonuses for the 10 executives?
Again, it's confidential.
So disclosing compensation of executives for financial institutions, as you had referenced to yourself in your opening statement, and many other corporate and crown boards is normal practice. So you're saying that this is not something that you would disclose to this committee?
I am not allowed to disclose that under the Privacy Act. It's personal information, and it's
Okay.
That's
Does
the
the
law
does
that
the
I follow.
housing minister give the final sign-off on CMHC staff bonuses, including executive bonuses,
Our compensation is approved by the board.
by the board? Okay. Are there executives that sit on the board?
I am the only board member who's an
Okay.
executive.
So when yourself as the executive sitting on the board, do you yourself as the only executive on the board remove yourself from board of director deliberations and votes on executive bonuses?
Again, we don't refer to them as bonuses. They're a part of the,
Whatever
could
your
I just
term
take
is.
a second just to explain the incentive pay structure?
No,
Is
no,
it-
I'm asking the questions here. Please answer the
Okay.
questions.
And sorry, your question was, do I step out of the room? I have
Yes.
not been through that exercise yet, so I don't know what my process will be or what the governance should be.
And who also decides the metrics, targets, or performance indicators for bonuses?
For incentive pay, the employee and their manager will determine the
Are they signed
expectations
off,
of
are they
the
signed off by
position
the
that
board,
they-
though?
Pardon me?
Are they signed off by the board?
The individual expectations are not signed off by the board.
Can you please table for this committee the metrics, targets, or performance indicators that would be utilized for staff incentive or bonuses?
Again, I
Whether it's for
cannot. It
staff
would
or
be- That would
for,
be confidential information. It's a privacy, the Privacy Act
for
prevents
disclosing the
disclosure of
metrics that somebody would be able to receive some type of an incentive or bonus, that's confidential.
I believe that
You're-
is confidential, yes.
You're a Crown Corporation,
Maybe I can add,
yes.
Mr. Chair.
That's not something that you will disclose to
We
this
do
board and
meet
table
the
to this
the
board?
disclosure requirements and transparency of compensation. It is in our financial statement. When it comes to
I'm
the
looking for the actual
individual
metrics,
level-
though, not just the line item saying this is how much was paid, what the actual metrics or performance indicators were. Can you please table that for this board?
Your time has exhausted. We'll now go to Mr. Van Bynen with the 6 minutes.
Mr. Chair?
Oh, sorry.
I appreciate you being here to bring us up to date in terms of progress. The Affordable Housing Fund works with organizations across Canada to create new affordable housing and repair and renovate existing affordable supply. Can you identify some of the target demographics that this fund seeks to benefit?
Yes, if you don't mind, I'm going to turn that question to my colleague who was
Appel
here when
au
it was
règlement.
developed.
Madame
Monsieur
Chabot?
Van Bynen, l'interprète nous informe que notre collègue parle pas directement dans le micro, fait que c'est difficile pour l'interprète.
Unfortunately, we're told that the wrong mic has been turned on for the witness. Now being corrected. Thank you.
Is it being interpreted to?
Can you hear me
French?
now? I think I had the wrong mic, Mr. Chair. They had the wrong mic.
Okay.
Okay.
Please, and
My
just before,
apologies.
Just before you begin, I would ask members, when you're close to somebody that's actively participating, the mic's open, please keep quiet. It does cause issues for the translators, who is hearing multiple voices. So I would ask members to respect that side. And Mr. Van Bynen, we'll go back to you. And
Thank you,
apologize.
Mr. Chair. Ms. Volk, the Affordable Housing Fund works with organizations across Canada to create new affordable housing and to repair and to renovate existing affordable supply. Can you identify some of the target demographics and communities that this fund seeks to benefit?
With your permission, Mr. Chair, I'll pass the question to my colleague Nadine, who was here when the program was developed.
Yes, thank you for the question. So the Affordable Housing Fund mandates that we do serve 11 vulnerable population priority groups, as stated in the National Housing Strategy. Examples of the vulnerable population group that have been identified: women and children, Indigenous population and communities, the Black community. We also have immigration as well as youth and seniors. Those are examples of the 11 priority group that has been identified on the National Housing Strategy, and therefore the funding that is going through the Affordable Housing Fund is going to these vulnerable population group. It is a national program, and therefore, in terms of equity, we are serving all communities across Canada, certainly in urban, rural, and northern areas. As a matter of fact, 96 projects in the territories were funding overall in the National Housing Strategy, and a lot of the funding is coming from the Affordable Housing Fund. We also repair, so we can go over some of the targets as well, but a big component of the Affordable Housing Fund is also regarding repairs. We talked about the need to preserve social and affordable housing, and one of the objectives of the Affordable Housing Fund is repairs, so we're over 166,000 units repaired to date on a target of 170,000. So those are examples of goals and social outcomes of that program.
I have an interest in the apartment construction fund. As a result of that program, there's about 3 or 4 towers that are going up in my community alone. But I understand that it's intended to make it easier for builders to build and to get projects done more quickly. But can you provide an overview of the changes and their expected impacts?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. CMHC reviews its program on an ongoing basis. We are required through Treasury Board submissions to evaluate programs and make sure that they continue to evolve and meeting the market needs. And through the apartment construction loan program, it is probably one of the most, I would say, the program that takes on a lot more risk than any type of program at CMHC or conventionally. It did to date build over 53,000 units on a target of 131,000 units, and it is scheduled to continue till 2032. Some of the reforms we've announced just recently is the extension of term. So we went from 10 years to 20 years. We've also introduced this concept of frequent builder to really accelerate the access to funding for builders that have been through our programs before. We are promoting portfolio approach. So we have done some in the past. You've seen probably the SANOC program in Vancouver. There's more in Toronto that we've done. Bundles of programs coming together. And we've also introduced some new carve-outs in ACLP to test innovative techniques in construction, modular, panelization. We've also, there's some carve-out around conversion, which I know there's some really nice project going on in Calgary as a result. And those are just examples of
Thank you.
ACLP.
I just have one last one question. Thank you.
And my clock says 5:11. Madame Chabot pour 2 minutes et 30.
2.5 minutes, Madame Chabot. 2 minutes? 2.5. Now, you're aware that the government has set up a GST holiday on rental housing construction. Do you have any estimates? Are you able to estimate how many housing units this could lead to the building of? We could get back to you with a specific figure. This is a program that is managed by Revenue Canada, so we can get back to you with a figure. Thank you. I was also referring to the CMHC's estimate of 3.5% of affordable housing that will go missing, that we won't have, and the Parliamentary Budget Officer drew up some figures on the gap, comparing them to immigration targets. Does the CMHC carry out the same type of evaluations? And what was that 3.5 million based on, not percent, but million, that gap? And once again, this is about affordable housing, and that's really quite a considerable number. Do you have any new figures? Do you take into account immigration levels when you draw up your figures?
That our economics people are working on it. Our Housing Economics and Insights group is studying that. There are a lot of factors at play right at the moment. So there is, in addition to the issues that are already at play in Canada, we've had some events to the south that may increase housing need in Canada as well. So those kinds of things are being incorporated in our models right now.
On a fait un rapport important.
An important report was published in 2023. A report on the National Housing Strategy. That was our report, our committee's report. And we made a number of recommendations to the CMHC, one of them being that you should advise the committee of the way in which specific targets are decided on and how they actually won't be sufficient for the government to meet its strategy targets. So how have you followed up on that?
Other questioning? Madame Zarrillo for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you so much. And I just wanted to let you know, Witness Volk, that this committee is empowered to study and report on the mandate, management, and operations of Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation. So you may get questions, but it's because we feel a responsibility to make sure that CMHC is being governed appropriately. I want to go back to my introduction about the idea of changing culture. I was really looking forward to meeting you today. I was really looking forward to a culture change at CMHC. The past CEO came to this committee and let us know that the expertise on affordable housing, on getting affordable housing built and on affordable housing is really bottomed out at CMHC, and I was hoping that your new leadership would reinvest in that need. I did hear that there has been a reallocation of policy staff out of your office, so I wonder if you could just highlight if that is true. And then I also wanted to go back to some testimony we had from a very well-known housing advocate, Steve Pomeroy, who said that certainly federal spending powers are a very important tool, but we have now gotten to the point where the National Housing Strategy has less than 10% of funding going through the provincial mechanism where the expertise largely was. And I want to say that I recently met with the housing minister for BC, who also said that this 90% of the federal government mechanism going through the federal government is not working. They want to get, the provincial governments are ready to get acting, but this money is being withheld from them. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about Steve Pomeroy's recommendation, which is rebalancing and ramping up some of the programs that are funded under the bilateral agreements, and allocate that to the provinces so they can get it going. They're the ones with the expertise.
Thank you. would you like me to address your first question first about the policy transfer? So on the policy transfer, we did transfer a number of individuals to the newly formed HICC, the Housing Infrastructure and Communities Canada Department. Those are resources that work on the development of policy. So they consider policy alternatives, they provide policy options to government, they work with, they sit at the intergovernmental tables, so they're working with the other departments in providing the formal advice to the minister and to their other government colleagues. So we did transfer a number of staff to the department. We did not transfer our delivery staff, so we still have a large number of people who are working on the ground with clients, serving clients every day. We still have a tremendous amount of knowledge. We still are the center of expertise for the delivery of those programs. So we still have a tremendous amount of knowledge of what's actually happening on the ground, what works, what doesn't work.
And then just if I could get a written answer to that.
Yeah, well, you'll come back again. We'll come back to you, and you can request that, Madame Cirillo. Mr. Aitchison for 5 minutes.
For 5 minutes?
5. We're following the 2.5 and 5 until the conclusion of the meeting.
Sorry, how much time do I have?
You have 5.
Thank you. I'd like to go back to the cost of government and the cost of building homes. You agreed that anything that we can do to reduce the cost of building homes is a good idea, and we know that the average of cost of government on every new home is about 30% on average across the country. If you do agree that we need to reduce the cost of building homes, would you agree with the Conservative plan to eliminate the federal sales tax on all homes under $1 million?
I haven't studied the proposal in detail, so I can't comment on whether that's a better idea than some other ideas that would be at play, but it certainly fits what I said earlier, that anything that reduces the cost of homes is probably a good thing. I don't have the responsibility to balance the federal books, mind you, but
The
so
CEO
in isolation,
well,
it's...
just so you know, the CEO of the Canadian Home Builders Association, Kevin Lee, said that the Conservative plan will help improve affordability and enable more supply. I'd say that's self-serving, it's Canadian home builders. But Mike Moffat is a housing economist, often referred to by the current government, said that he admired the boldness of such a move. This will get more housing built. Not too biased, probably, right? Tim Richter, he heads up the Alliance to End Homelessness, and he called this tax cut, quote, smart. You may not have done a thorough analysis, but surely you must agree that by reducing the cost of government this way is an important step in reducing the cost to build homes.
I believe that any step to reduce the cost of home building is an important step. I'm just referencing that I'm not the one that has to decide which piece is better in terms of the overall fiscal framework of the federal government, but it certainly would inspire more home building if we can reduce the cost of home building.
Okay, let's go back to something you should have a little more detail on. That's your programs you run. We'll go back to the MLI Select program, where you've made some minor changes. Your organization made some minor changes that effectively makes it really, it penalizes builders from paying out their CMHC loan on multi-unit rentals. It drastically reduces liquidity in the marketplace. So my question then is, why would you increase the penalty on these loans by almost 300% to pay them out?
I apologize. I'm not aware of the change that you're referring to. I'm very happy to look into it and get back to you, but I'm not.
It looks
not
like Ms.
familiar
LeBlanc
with
may
it.
know. She's looks like she's senior vice president of policy and.
So I am aware that we've made 2 changes in MLI Select last year. One is around the pricing, which we review on an annual basis, overseen by our board. So that's definitely one. You're talking about prepayment penalties, which would be at the financial institution responsibility, because we deal directly with the banks when it comes to that. So I am not aware of any prepayment changes or requirements that we've made on this product. We also made some changes to the ranking and the scoring of the affordability versus energy efficiency. But what you're talking about, I will have to get back. It's not something that I am aware of. only 2 changes were made to MLI Select.
I would appreciate you getting back to me on that one, because if we are making it more difficult for builders to pay out CMHC insured and CMHC loans on multi-unit buildings that they can then go and reinvest, that's very counterproductive. It makes no sense at all. And so if that's what's going on, I'd like to hope that you can have that change. So please do report that back. I'm wondering as well if, back to my colleague, Ms. Gray's line of questioning, for the last 3 fiscal years, if you can table for this committee as well, what was the total number of employees at the CMHC for the last 3 fiscal years? And if you can also table the total amount paid in whatever term you use to describe bonuses or incentive or honorary, whatever you call it, if you could table that for the last 3 fiscal years as well, please.
I believe that is covered in our financial reporting. So yes, to the extent that it's public information, I'm happy to table it here. I mean, that it can be public, provided I'm not breaking any Privacy Act restrictions, we can table it with you.
Well, I think
Yes, I
total
believe-
numbers shouldn't be a
Right.
problem.
I agree.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. And I think, how much time do I have? I only have 20 seconds. I'd like you to take a look at cutting the GST, the federal sales tax on the purchase of a new home. I think that if you do some analysis, you could report back to this committee that I think you'd come to the conclusion it's a really good idea, and you could report that positively back to this committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Aitchison. We'll now move to Mr. Long for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon to my colleagues, and thank you so much for coming in. Just a few comments before I actually ask a question. I was encouraged to hear you say that it takes 3 levels of government to fix the housing crisis that we are in. I took note of the members opposite talking about housing builds in Toronto and other provinces were down. Let's not forget that there's a Conservative Premier, Doug Ford, who's the Premier of Ontario. We have Conservative Premiers across the country, including one that just lost their election in New Brunswick, Blaine Higgs, who basically fought every initiative that we took forward. I think that as a federal government, although every program can be improved, whether it's been the Co-Investment Fund, the Rapid Housing Initiative, the Housing Accelerator Fund, I think these programs are transformational. I think they're helping. I do note that the Conservative Party voted against each and every one of these programs. And I do believe that as a federal government, we are standing up, we are leading, and we are doing a lot of things that are necessary to help build houses right across this country. So back to my wonderful riding of St. John Rothsay, I was really happy recently to announce $9 million through the Housing Accelerator Fund for the City of St. John. And the city has set a target of 1,100 net new residential units over the next 3 years. And according to the progress report, and obviously mayor and council that I talked to, they're at 37% of that total. And a big part of their strategy is zoning bylaw reform to facilitate housing. So from your vantage point in overseeing many agreements that were formed with different municipalities across Canada, can you speak to some of the reforms that cities like mine have already implemented as a result of the Housing Accelerator Fund? Thank you.
Yes, thank you for the question. All of the agreements are certainly on CMHC's website. You can definitely see what the cities have committed to. There is some very transformational. We talked earlier about AI permitting. Certainly, that's a really good example. That's accelerating drastically the permitting. We've seen densification. 2-4 as a right is another one. Definitely some movements in terms of requirements like parking. One of the elements of the Accelerator Fund is that everybody that's committed in signing an agreement through this program is the commitment to build their housing assessment plan, which is something that not all cities had in the past. And this is understanding the housing needs in their communities, the link to the infrastructure needs in the communities, and knowing their forecast on housing based on type and population growth over the next few years. And that's something that we are gathering through this program and having cities built. So that's very transformational in nature, to have a bigger picture in Canada of the housing needs.
Thank you for that. I asked this question probably a year back of the past president, Romy Bowers. And Ms. Volk, I know that you were appointed president of CMHC, I believe, in July of this year, June or July of this year. So my question to Romy Bowers, and the same question to you is, and I know MP Zarrillo kind of touched on this, but it is the culture of CMHC. And despite a lot of good work that you do, and I'm just keeping it real, there's a lot of builders, developers that just don't have a good experience, whether it's the bureaucracy, the length of time it takes to get applications through, so on and so forth. So I know President Bowers committed to trying to lead a change of culture, and I've always said that CMHC should be, less bureaucratic and more entrepreneurial in their culture and in their spirit. So can you just talk to me about any changes that you've made to increase the entrepreneurial side of CMHC since you've been there as president? Thank you.
I find the culture at CMHC to be fantastic. The staff are incredibly committed to what they do. They're a very dedicated, very passionate group. We can absolutely do some things to improve turnaround times. We've implemented some new service standards, and we will continue to study those and make sure that we're hitting those targets.
Thank you, Mr. Long. Mr. Seebeck?
The NDP, no?
On my note says Mr. Seebeck.
Great.
5 minutes.
Great, thanks. Thanks very much. I want to turn to performance, because you've talked about that bonus. You won't give us information on what bonuses are linked to. You've said that's private, and so we won't understand the metrics for awarding bonuses at the company. But when I look at what your motto is, part of it is, together we strive to ensure more Canadians have access to what they deserve, a home they can afford that meets their needs. When I look at housing starts across the country, the housing start performances are not good. Vancouver, $115 million in housing accelerator funding. Year-to-date starts year-over-year from October of 2024 to 2023, down 15%. Toronto, $471 million. Their housing starts 2024 versus 2023, down 40%. Ottawa, $176 million. Housing starts 2024 versus 2023, down 22%. So when you're paying out almost $30 million in bonuses, and you won't tell us what the metrics are for those bonuses, is it pretty safe to conclude that the metrics have nothing to do with actually getting houses built?
I don't think that's safe to conclude. I think, as I say, they're not bonuses. They are incentive pay. We design our salaries competitively to attract the best and the brightest.
But shouldn't it be linked to performance? Like, you're a housing organization. Shouldn't the bonuses reflect that more houses are getting built, or that the process is easier or faster or more streamlined? That's how it works in the real world. Like a real estate agent, they get commissions based on the number of houses they sell. That's how it works. And we are right now experiencing the worst housing affordability in the history of our country. You're a housing agency, and you're paying out $30 million worth of bonuses, and you won't tell us why. It clearly cannot be about getting houses built.
There are many factors as to whether houses get built or not, and they start with things that are largely outside of, many of which are outside of CMHC's control. Inflation, the cost of building a house has increased, the interest rates increased. These are primary reasons for the lack of building and the decline in housing starts. So our incentive pay, when people are identifying with their managers the way that they can contribute, it's very related to what an employee can do to influence the outcomes. And
What outcomes?
Well, it's going to very much depend on the employee. Some of them are involved in the delivery of programs, and they will have targets as to how, the targets of units that are done in the programs in which they work, things like that. But it depends very much on the employee.
Okay,
Someone in an overhead function would not have the same.
With your motto, we strive to ensure more Canadians have access to what they deserve. This is right on your website, a home that they can afford that meets their needs. With a housing crisis we have in Canada, you think it's fair to pay out $30 million worth of bonuses to employees?
We're not paying bonuses, sir. We're paying incentive pay, and it's an agreement. We set a total compensation level for someone. We give part of it to them at the beginning, and we reserve part of it to say, if you meet your objectives, you get the rest of it.
Well, in the
It's not a
real
bonus.
world, that's called a bonus. You can call it whatever you want, but it's a bonus, and it's usually tied to performance. And you won't tell us what the performance metric is. So I'm putting the question to you. It really can't be about actually getting houses built, and it can't be about the process. We heard from Victoria Park Community Homes, a not-for-profit, that it took 6 years of working with your agency to finally get their project approved, and we might get shovels in the ground this year. So is that part of the performance review, the people that were involved in that project that took it 6 years to get approval? That's the they deserve a bonus for working on that project?
I'm not familiar with that project or what would have contributed to the delay, but I can say that every individual has an agreement in terms of the way they can contribute to the corporation's overall objective, and it will depend on, they're very specific to the individual.
The overall objective seems to be based on your website that together we strive to ensure more Canadians have access to what they deserve, a home they can afford that meets their needs. And we see that there's a housing crisis. So why so many bonuses paid out to 98% of employees in the middle of a housing crisis with a motto that says we should build homes?
Back, Mr. Collins. Mr. Collins, you have 5 minutes.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Volk, you talked about partnerships and the importance of partnerships in your opening. It's hard for me to listen every day in the House of Commons when someone pulls the string and the leader of the opposition's back and he talks or demonizes municipalities for not doing their part, right? He and his political surrogates, you heard it today in terms of development charges and blaming cities for the cost of housing, and that's the reason why, as he pretends, there's a housing crisis here in the country, and we know that's not the truth. We know that development charges across the country pay for important things. You can't build houses without water and wastewater services. You can't build communities without rec centers and fire stations and police stations. And so many of us around the table come from the municipal sector. And it's hard for me to sit at this table and in the House of Commons and hear the leader of the opposition when someone pulls that string in his back and he says the same thing over and over every day. So I'm going to ask you about partnerships. I'm going to ask you about the importance. Our government's taken a different approach, of course. We're working with municipalities. We're trying to work with provinces. My friend and colleague alluded to the issues that we've had with some of our provincial partners. Much like Premier Ford, the leader of the opposition, is using encampments as a political prop. He's commercials, right? Doesn't talk about encampments in the House of Commons or the solutions. But we're building those programs to try to help municipalities and our nonprofit partners. So I'm going to ask you about partnerships, and I'd like you to talk about the importance of dealing with our provincial partners and trying to get them on side for some of the programs, as well as our municipal partners.
So both of our municipal, thank you for the question. The partnerships really are, as I said in my opening remarks, that's who we are. We don't do things alone. We do things with partners. Our provincial partners are very important. Our municipal partners are very important. And without them, we wouldn't be able to get a lot of stuff done. We have, there is a relationship with the provinces that is more directly managed day to day in many respects by the Housing and Infrastructure Department. So they have the primary responsibility to nurture and develop the relationships with the provinces on a bilateral basis. So I can't speak in that much detail But I can say we're involved because our programs are being brought to the table in those discussions, but we don't have the overall lead for that program. But I can say they're very conscious of the need to work with their provinces, with the provinces, and try to develop programs together. And as we're designing programs, making sure that they're going to work for the provinces who would be delivering them.
Thank you for that answer. I'll switch gears right now to building capacity within the nonprofit sector. There's over 80,000 people that sit on Toronto's affordable housing wait list. There's over 6,000 that sit on Hamilton's, and that's a reflection of 30 years of underinvestment in that sector from both the federal government, different administrations at the federal level, as well as provincial investments that we haven't seen in 30 years. When I asked your predecessor about building capacity in the sector, she said, "We don't build capacity, we're underwriters." And I can't tell you how disappointed I was with that statement. It says a lot about the culture issues, I think, that my friend and colleague just asked you about. You said the culture is excellent. I think most people in the industry, whether it's the private industry or the nonprofit industry, would agree with my colleague's assessment and some of the criticisms that I've leveled at the organization here at this committee, as well as when I was a municipal councillor, and some of the frustrating issues that I had to deal with in terms of the application process when I was president of City Housing Hamilton. So I'm going to ask you that question again in terms of what your role is in terms of building capacity in the sector. We are not going to build 6,000 plus nonprofit homes in Hamilton without the assistance of CMHC in terms of building capacity with organizations that don't have a lot of staff and, quite frankly, don't have a lot of money.
Right. It's an excellent point and an excellent question. I don't think it relates to our culture. I hope it doesn't, but I'll be on the lookout for that should I see signs of that. I think we're measured on targets and the delivery of targets. We try to work with as many nonprofits as we can to help them get their projects over the line. It's obviously easier and faster to deal with large nonprofits who are skilled, repeat clients, and they know the process. It takes more hand-holding to work with the smaller clients. And we are looking at ways to address that. It is an important question. It does require resources to work with them and help them through the application process, because it's in many respects it's like a process for applying for a loan. There are things that have to, there's an amount of information we need to do our due diligence, that sort of thing. And if it's their first time through, sometimes that does take a while. We appreciate that's challenging for them, and we are looking at ways that we can simplify our application processes, streamline some of the documents, that sort of thing, to really help them through the process. But I appreciate at the end of the day, it's still a complex transaction for an organization. In many cases, this would be their only one that they would do in a lifetime.
Thank you, Mr. Collins.
Mr. Chair, I know I'm out of time. I should have mentioned that I will have questions for the clerk by the end of today for Ms. Volk and her staff.
Okay, that's fine. When your chance comes up again. Madame Chabot, pour 2 minutes et
Oui,
30.
merci. Je vais prendre
2 minutes. Yes, thank you, and I will give you a chance to answer my prior question, which I will now state again. What I was saying is that we have tabled a number of studies here drawn up by HUMA about the housing strategy in June, about monetization in 2022, and now we're working on a report on federal funding to investments for housing. In our report of June 2023, more specifically, we made a number of recommendations, including some addressed to the CMHC. What we were asking was for you to explain to the committee how targets are set based on the National Housing Strategy, and tell us whether we will be able to meet these targets thanks to your involvement. And we were asking CMHC what corrections the federal government should make to its strategy to meet its aims.
Have bells are ringing in the house. No, bells are ringing in the house. The bells are ringing in the house.
Pardon?
I still have to. Is the committee okay with continuing?
Oh, les cloches.
Yeah, oui.
No. No.
Back in action.
Okay, thank you.
Kevin's back. Kevin's back in action. We're okay.
Thank you, committee members. Order. Madame Chabot. Sorry, Madame Chabot, I'll give you extra time to refocus and continue with your question.
J'ai combien de minutes, là, Monsieur le
So
Président?
how many minutes do I have at this point, Mr. Chair? 6 or 2? 2. Still 2? 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Very well. So that was my question. And that's also what I was aiming at first time round. Are there any corrections we should bring? 4.2 billion in public funds, and we don't seem to be getting to affordability.
In terms of how targets are set, we set the targets in accordance with the amount of money that we're asked to deliver. So for a certain amount of money, we'll look at how many units that could support. And that's related to the affordability targets within the program. So if it's a deeply affordable program that we're trying to develop, the targets that will be able to support a smaller number of units with the same size of money, right? If it's sort of affordable to the average Canadian, that's one set of targets. If it's deeply affordable, it's
Je peux
less. So
vous
that's the
arrêter,
general.
vu que j'ai juste
All
deux
right.
petites minutes.
Given that these 2.5 minutes are very short, I will stop you there. Look, there's a problem, and your predecessor was somewhat in agreement with this. There are different definitions of affordability across the programs that don't really meet the needs of people. You're saying 30% of income, that's your own definition, whereas the programs say the average market income. So would that be one criteria that should be revamped?
Thanks for the question. It is a really good question. The answer is that there are different kinds of programs that require different sorts of affordability. So if we're looking at a supply program as opposed to a deeply affordable program, it might be appropriate to look at a different measure. If we're looking at, so sometimes we will look at affordability measures related to the average renter. Sometimes we'll look at affordability measures related to the average household income. And it really depends what kind of program we're looking at. If it's a supply program, it may be more appropriate to look at the renter. If it's a deeply affordable program, we're more likely to look at the income of a household as we're establishing those targets.
Merci, Madame Chabot. Madame Zarrillo.
Thank you, Ms. Chabot.
Follow the same sequence, 5s and 2.5s until we conclude.
Thank you so much. Witness Volk, I think CMHC has lost its way, and I have a lot of hope that with your leadership, it can come back to what it was supposed to be. And CMHC came to be because of post-war needs for housing, for affordable housing, for new families that were beginning. There's many similar things that are happening now. You know, we've got an affordability crisis, we've got a labor crisis, we've got a lot of immigration, which also happened after the Second World War. So I'm really hopeful that you will open your mind to the idea that CMHC needs a culture shift. And I do not discredit that it is a financial institution, as you said, but it is a financial institution with an underlying goal of making sure no one is homeless in this country. And it's not doing that right now. So I'll go back to just my question about how the provinces only get 10% of the funding right now, and if there's anything CMHC can do to shift the balance where more of the funding can get to the provinces so it can get going. And I also want to add on the federal lands. So on the federal lands front, there is a commitment to federal lands. Again, it's not through housing, it's through Procurement Canada, which I believe is also a mistake because Procurement Canada doesn't have the same thoughts, understanding, feelings about how we need to get housing built. But I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind commenting on whether you think CMHC has a role to play in getting housing built on federal lands. And if there is an opportunity, and this comes to me from my friends across the country that are working on housing, to get ahead of it, to make sure that there is CMHC funding in place for federal lands for not-for-profits, because they cannot compete with private corporations. There's a major disadvantage for not-for-profits in this country that continually have to struggle to compete with these large financial organizations that have the ability to leverage billions of dollars, not just millions. Thank you.
Thank you for the questions. So I'll take the question about the federal-provincial dynamic first. So our programs at CMHC, we are provided appropriations by the government, and we must spend them in accordance with the guidelines that are prescribed to us. So we have some programs that are designed for provinces, so that money that we can disperse through the provinces through bilateral agreements, and then we have other programs that are not through the provinces that are.
Do you have
direct.
any influence on that with the government?
I like to believe that I can influence some of that, but I'm sorry.
The time's go. Quick response.
Okay, so I try to influence those as I can.
Thank you.
We're already
Madame
done. Okay, I'm
Giroux.
going to need some written.
We're over. That's fine. You'll have several more chances to get back. Mr. Aitchison now for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I heard a lot of talk about partnerships and, of course, the Housing Accelerator Fund. I know that the Liberals would love to try to pretend that it's working. I'm going to give you some data here that I suspect you probably already have. But since the Housing Accelerator Fund was launched, the number of homes permitted has gone up only 1.8% since the same time period previous to that, so a 1.8% increase. And of course, according to CMHC data, in municipalities over 10,000 housing starts are basically flat. So from January to October 2023, about 187,000 starts. The same time period, January to October 2024, 188,000. So, starts have basically stopped as well, and of course the government is committed to getting 3.8 million new homes constructed by 2031. So that's 2 million more than what's already been forecast and what the CMHC said we need to do to get back to affordability. And so we have all these programs and all these funds, billions of dollars, borrowed money too, I would add, that's supposed to speed up the construction of homes, and it's actually not working. In fact, in larger cities, starts are plummeting. Like I gave you some data on some of these cities. So I'm wondering if you can speak to me a little bit about these secret agreements with municipalities. We've asked to see these agreements with municipalities, so we'll use Toronto as the example. $471 million, raised development charges by 42%, housing starts are down 40%. Is there any criteria in these agreements related to the cost to build in these municipalities?
Related to the cost to build. So the agreements there are agreements around essentially accelerating the process. And by accelerating the process, I suppose we do affect the cost, but the primary purpose of those agreements is around by accelerating the zoning, accelerating the approval process.
Okay, so we know that that's not working. In these deals, so Toronto got 1/4 of their $471 million. So based on housing starts being down 40%, will they get the next 3/4 payments of that $471 million, or will that stop because that hasn't worked?
Well, I think it's early, as I mentioned earlier. I think it's too early to actually look at the starts. I don't think the starts is the right measure because this is accelerating permitting and zoning and things, but it won't immediately result in construction. This is still a process. So I don't think you'll see it factoring into the housing starts numbers yet, but there will be other commitments. There are other commitments that were made, and the cities are very close. Some are already at the point, but some are very close to the point where they will be reporting against those committees and commitments, and there will be some reporting around that. And the way the program works, if they're not meeting their commitments, they don't get the money. That's the deal.
So you would agree that a program that's not delivering results isn't worth the program?
The results as, well, the city will, what I'm talking about is the results that the city has committed to.
Okay.
And they need to meet what they have agreed to meet in their agreement. And if they don't, if they can't demonstrate that they've done that, then they don't get the money.
Can the committee see those agreements? Can we see what they've committed to? This is a public body using public money and making a commitment for more public money. Can the public see what those commitments are? What you're measuring their success against? I mean, we know starts are down, but
Yeah, we're just getting to the point now where the, like I said, the committees, the municipalities have a requirement to report a year after the signature of the agreement. And we're just getting to the point that they would be reporting. So as we get those, there will be some reporting of
you
where
must
the
admit,
cities are
though,
versus
that
their
committing
commitments.
$4 billion of federal tax dollars, people's money, to municipalities based on some agreements, that it would be fair for the people who supplied that money and their grandchildren who are going to be paying it off, it must be fair for us to see what those agreements are. What did they have to agree to do?
I believe most of the cities, I don't know about if they all have, I'd have to check, but I believe the cities have posted their agreements. I believe. I'm not positive in that in every respect.
Well, let me say this quite simply. You know, borrowing more money to fund bureaucracies that promise to do better, that clearly are not doing better, that are making results worse. In fact, things are getting worse in the midst of a housing crisis, despite the beautiful partnerships that the Liberals like to talk to and their massive deficit spending and their borrowing to build bureaucracies. The results are not there. And so I really do hope you take a close look at reducing the cost of government, the Conservative plan to eliminate the federal sales tax on homes, and how other levels of government might reduce their charges and fees to make sure that we can reduce the cost of getting homes built in this country, because doing things the same old way like we have for the last 9 years has produced bigger debt and fewer homes.
Thank you, Mr. Aitchison. Mr. Long, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Before I cede my time to MP Morris, I just would say, partnerships can be challenging. Partnerships can be difficult at times. But for the leader of the party opposite, the leader of the official opposition, to basically infer that mayors across this country are incompetent, that is not a way to build partnerships. And I know in the House yesterday I asked a question about the Housing Accelerator Fund with respect to my city of St. John, and the leader of the opposition came back and basically said, I don't know who your mayor is, despite the fact that he's been in St. John 4 times over the last 8 months. I find it hard to believe he wouldn't know who Donald Reardon is, the mayor of St. John, but he didn't. So again, I think that leadership works with all levels of government and doesn't insinuate that mayors are incompetent across this country. Now I'd like to cede my time to MP Morris. Thank you.
4 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, MP Long. Ms. Volk, I appreciate that already in this meeting you've shared, you understand there is a crisis when it comes to the affordability of housing, and you mentioned particularly when it comes to deeply affordable housing. This is similar to what we've heard from researchers like Dr. Carolyn Weitzman, who has put out some research recently, following on the questions from Ms. Chabot as well, when it comes to the definition of affordable housing and the impact that that has. As I shared with you before this meeting, in my community, for example, the number of people living unsheltered tripled from 2018 to 2021, from just over 300 to over 1,000, and more recently now it has gone from 1,000 to over 2,300. So it's having significant impacts in communities like mine, and one of the solutions is to ensure that the federal government funds deeply affordable and affordable housing. Have you seen the research from Dr. Weitzman when it comes to the extent to which CMHC is not using its own definition of affordable housing on affordable housing funds?
I haven't, but I see Nadine nodding her head, so I think she has.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So there is one definition that CMHC uses to better understand the core housing need in Canada, which is the 30% definition that most of all of you have mentioned today. And we do use this definition on contribution-based programs that are that has the la formule mathématique that permit
formula.
ability, like the Canada Housing Benefit.
Thank you, Ms. LeBlanc. I'd like to talk about a specific example then. So the Affordable Housing Fund, a $15 billion fund. That fund has no criteria for 70% of the units. The 30% of the units that do have criteria are pegged to 80% of market rent. It doesn't actually use the affordable housing definition of CMHC. And so, Ms. Volk, I recognize you're coming into this role. It's been only about 6 months or so. Is this something you intend on at least looking at to understand better so that Canadians can have a sense that a fund called the Affordable Housing Fund, I think we can all agree, should be funding what CMHC recognizes is affordable housing?
Absolutely, and I think you've touched on a really important point, which is that the word affordability has come to mean something different than it used to. So when I worked at CMHC from 96 to 2005, affordability, when we talked about affordable housing, we always meant what we now call deeply affordable, because now there's another category of homes that may not be in core housing need, but are still finding homes unaffordable. So we try to identify whether our programs are about this sort of general affordable housing or the deeply affordable housing, which is the kind that you're referring to. And we need to make sure that we have programs that address both, but we absolutely need programs on the deeply affordable housing side, which is what
actually, Ms. Volk, in communities like mine, it's both. I think one of the concerns is that for the largest financing program that CMHC offers, the apartment construction loan program, only 4% of funds of the units built are funding those who were in core housing need. In addition, though, that because CMHC isn't using income-based definitions, which is CMHC's own definition, it's leading towards both affordable and deeply affordable housing not being built at the rate it could be. I'd like to ask with my remaining time, if Ms. Volk, if you could depose to this committee the number of units funded by CMHC with the rents of the units that were built, broken down by program type. Would that be possible?
Don't know if we have the information, but I'll undertake to see what we have.
I think that data is really important so that parliamentarians can make decisions based on that.
Yes, and if it is available, would you provide it in writing to the committee, Ms. Volk? So that concludes your time, Mr. Morris. We'll now go to Ms. Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Budget 2024 stated that there would be 3.87 million homes built by 2031, which is approximately 550,000 homes per year, which is approximately 1,515 homes a day, or one home every 57 seconds. Based on the federal government's current plans and looking at projections, will this be met?
I don't have a good answer for that question. I'm afraid it's a very good question, but I don't know. There are certainly, there are many factors that go into that, and as we talked about, interest rates being a large part of that, and inflation, the cost of goods. It is the private developers that build, and we are hoping that they will be active and build. We're doing what we can in terms of our programs, but I don't have
So that's the plan, to be hopeful, I guess?
To do everything we can to spur that development so that houses get built.
So based on that, I will note that there were only 240,000 home starts in 2023, and the CMHC stopped publishing Canada-wide housing completion data in January of 2023. So this is the first time in half a century we actually don't have data on housing completions in Canada. Why did this stop?
It's a very good question, and I know the answer. I'm going to see if I can remember it quickly. But we do publish the starts and not the completions. Do you remember I had a discussion, but I don't recall the details.
When will you start publishing the completions again?
We can take that away. I believe the same information is available through our report that we published through the starts, but we can take that question away.
So you can get back to this committee when you will start publishing completions again?
We'll get back to you with the answer as to when we stopped and why, and that will feed into the question of whether we'll start again.
Okay, thank you. We heard a lot of testimony at this committee at a recent housing study how CMHC policies are adding red tape, costs and delays. And just one that I'll bring up was from Ontario Aboriginal Services, which said that CMHC requiring new housing to be built in excess of local building codes adds 7 to 8% to the total cost. And so it seems like there are a lot of different policies that have been developed that are at CMHC for people that are accessing funding that are above building codes. And so where did this come from? Was this from some type of mandate or direction given by the minister's office, or were these internal policies that were all developed by bureaucrats, by staff at CMHC?
They would be in accordance with directives provided by the government. So when we get money for appropriations that we're to deliver in a program, the requirements for the program are established centrally. And when we have the programs, there are requirements, for example, for energy efficiency perhaps, or other accessibility, other features. So depending on the program, if it's from our housing program side of the business, those are directed by conditions that we get through the central agencies.
So the government would be directing you to impose these different parameters that we've heard. I just gave one example, but there was a lot of testimony that it's actually adding more red tape, more costs, and more delays. So that direction, you're saying, comes directly from the government, and the government is actually causing those effects.
If it's in our housing programs, yes, we make the determinations of what to do in our insurance programs, but if it's coming from the housing programs, they would be in accordance with government direction. We don't believe that I absolutely understand that if we're looking for construction elements that aren't part of the building code, that there could be additional costs in that. There is some evidence to suggest that some of those additions.
Sorry, we're going to have to suspend while there is an evacuation.